Hi, welcome to Hudson River Park's Backyard BioBlitz Diversity Digest. My name is Siddhartha, and thank you for joining me today. This past week was the second Hudson River Park BioBlitz, and today's digest will be taking a look at some of the highlights of what we found, both by park-goers and by park staff. Hudson River Park is a 4-mile waterfront park and estuarine sanctuary along the west side of Manhattan, from West 59th Street to Chambers Street. Starting this summer, we've launched an iNaturalist project to collect information on the hundreds of species that make the park their home. If you want to participate, you can download the free iNaturalist app and use it to upload pictures of any living thing in the park, plant, animal, fungus, or otherwise, and it will be automatically logged under our biodiversity project page. If you make observations during BioBlitzes, like the one that happened this past week, it'll be logged also under that BioBlitz, and you can potentially have your photos featured during these diversity digests at the conclusion upon them. Even if you don't participate in the BioBlitzes, any pictures or information is helpful for our growing body of data. If you have any questions during this digest at any point, please comment in the chat, and we will try to get to them at the end during a Q&A session. So let's jump into this past week and see what we found. I'm going to share my screen so we can look at some of the pictures. Just gonna make this bigger for you. So first of all, thank you to all of our participants. We had 5 observers, both from the community and one of our park staff, as well as 25 identifiers who helped us to identify 37 species for a total of 55 observations, which is really exciting. So first of all, congratulations to Colby1 for both making the most observations and identifying the most species, followed closely by DJ Ringer. Thank you also to Christine710 and R. Wright for participating in this week's BioBlitz. So let's get to some of the species. We had a lot of invertebrates. Terrestrially, we had a ton of Lepidopterans. And by Lepidopterans, I mean butterflies and moths. We had 10 different species found. We'll take a look at some of the more numerous ones, but monarchs were first. Here's a lovely monarch butterfly picture. You can see this one here is actually using its proboscis extended to drink nectar from these flowers. We also had eastern tiger swallowtails and many other species that we saw in multiple iterations. Tiger swallowtails, this one's actually missing the swallowtails that give it its name on its second set of wings here that usually extend out. But that's why they're named that. We also have a red admiral. So this is an interesting picture of a red admiral because it's the underside of the wings. This is not usually the angle at which you see these. And I actually, even personally, I didn't know that this is what the underside of their wings looked like. Normally, when you're looking at a red admiral, you're seeing this right here with this beautiful white, black, and orange. Really stands out, but the underside actually is really great camouflage, and you can even see how it's blending in here. Not the side you usually get to see, which is really neat. We also had common sooty wings. We had some skippers. We had other some other moths as well. We'll take a look at some of those in a bit. But Lepidopterans, like butterflies and moths, are named that because of the scales on their wings. So you can really see on this one too, it looks almost pixelated. And those are the individual scales, so to speak, that cover their wings. You can see that on the tiger swallowtail too. It has that pixelation almost, looks like little dots, and that's actually what the dust is from moths and butterflies. Those are their scales being shed upon contact. So the monarchs are here. We saw 6 different monarchs in the park this week from various persons. They're here because of the milkweed. Common milkweed, native plant. It is the only thing monarch caterpillars will eat, and it's the only thing that monarch adults will lay the eggs on because it's the only thing the caterpillars eat. So interestingly enough, though, they're not the only thing that eats, right, milkweed. So here we can see some Oleander Aphids, I believe. It looks like there's maybe some other aphids or bugs as well, but these yellow ones are Oleander Aphids. We have another picture of them here. Now, aphids and milkweed bugs, which was another common bug that we saw in the park this week. You can see the detail on them, really lovely picture. Aphids and milkweed bugs are hemipterans, which means they are what are called true bugs. Bug is kind of a catch-all term for a lot of insects that people informally use, but technically speaking, bugs are insects in order Hemiptera, like the milkweed bugs and like these aphids. They are characterized by sucking mouth parts and half wing shells, Hemiptera, half wing. There's more variants. That's not a rule of thumb, but generally speaking, they do all have sucking mouth parts, sort of like a mosquito, similar to mosquitoes. And the other interesting thing about true bugs is many of them don't go through true metamorphosis. They don't pupate the way butterflies or moths or a lot of beetles do. They don't, grow a chrysalis and drastically change. They start out as nymphs, which don't look all dissimilar in some species to the adult form. And they just either get bigger or the nymphs do change, but they don't go into a cocoon of any sort. So that's kind of interesting. So we're glad to see the monarchs on this milkweed. We're glad to see other animals are also making use of that. Now, another lepidopteran, before we get out of the butterflies and moths, that I wanted to just draw attention to, which is really cool, is this is a Snowberry clearwing. You can see why it is named a clearwing here. Now, the cool thing about the clearwing is that it's a moth, right? But this is a nectar drinking moth. And actually, these are often mistaken for hummingbirds. And you can see it has a similar body shape, similar wing shape, and it has a long proboscis sticking out, drinking the nectar, same flowers that the monarch was drinking earlier. Now, they're not the only moth like this. They belong to Sphinx Moths, the family, the Sphinx Moth family. Many of them do look like hummingbirds, and they're diurnal. Many moths are nocturnal, but these guys are active during the day. One of the really cool things about this family is that they are one of 4 groups of animals that can actually hover when they're flying, like hover in place, stay in one place by beating their wings rapidly. The other 3 being hummingbirds, which they're mistaken for. Some species of bats can do that. And a species of insect called hoverflies. Now, let's see if I can pull this up. This is one of the hoverflies that was found, in the park this week. Hoverflies are really interesting. They are flies, right? They're not a different group of insects. However, many of them, like this guy here, look like a wasp or a bee, right? They have that classic wasp or wasp and bee black and yellow striping on their abdomen, but they can't actually sting you, right? So this is when an animal is broadcasting the fact that it is dangerous to other animals, when it's eschewing, when it's giving up the camouflage and saying, look at me, you don't want to mess with me because I am going to mess you up. Like the ways venomous animals do, poison dart frogs, coral snakes. There's a trade-off, right? You're giving away your position to broadcast the fact that you are actually a deterrent, and actually they want to stay away from you, not the other way around. So this animal cannot do that. This animal is not dangerous. It does not have a stinger. So this kind of mimicry is called Batesian mimicry, when a harmless animal mimics a dangerous animal. So this is also what we see in milk snakes. Milk snakes have the same red, yellow, black coloration as coral snakes, just in a different order. but they look close enough to coral snakes that many animals just let them alone because they don't want to take the chance. So that's really cool. Also really cool, this was a parasitoid wasp. This is the common hoverfly parasitoid wasp, excuse me, that, as its name might suggest, parasitizes the hoverflies. So this type of wasp, the females will capture or attack hoverflies, like, oops, let me go back to our actual picture of the hoverflies. Parasitize this hoverfly that was also found in the park and lay, what I mean by that is she will lay her eggs in either the larvae or the adult. Usually it's larvae. Cicada killers are a parasitoid type of wasp that parasitizes cicadas, as you might expect. And its larvae will grow in the body of its target organism, feed on its body, and then hatch, basically, and then the cycle repeats itself. Really, really neat to see such an intricate life cycle in some animals, and even to see both ends of that life cycle within the park within the same week. I mean, that makes sense, but it's really neat to be able to see that. Things don't usually work out that well. In terms of water, our staff scientists found some great critters this week. We have our ever-present oyster toadfish. This is our most caught fish. We see these guys year-round, or they're here year-round. We don't catch them in the winter because they're hibernating. Well, not technically hibernating because they're not. They don't make their own body heat. So it's going into a torpor, but still, for lack of a better word, hibernating, rolling themselves up in mud and not moving for months. We also caught a few juvenile toadfish as well, and you can see how feisty they are, even as babies. He's opening his mouth in a threat display. Love to see those. We also caught a northern pipefish this week, which was really cool. Northern pipefish we saw a bit more earlier in the summer as well, before it got really hot, along with the seahorses, which was their relative. You can see they have that classic synathid fused jaw. So like seahorses, they belong to the same family. They have fused elongate snouts that let them eat tiny, tiny crustaceans. Hard to tell a little bit from this picture, but it might, yeah, I think that looks like a gravid male. So you can see over here, the line of the body extends and there's this little, it widens over here. That's probably his brood pouch. Just like a seahorse, the males have a brood pouch where they keep their eggs. So he probably has a bunch of eggs in there. And then that's the fish. And in terms of invertebrates in the water, we have this beautiful spider crab. Portly spider crab, or nine-spined spider crab, is the most common species we get here. This is by no means fully grown, but it is bigger than some of the juveniles we've mostly been catching recently. You can see this guy has all this algae on his back. And as I think I said last month when we found a few juvenile spider crabs, these are decorator crabs. So they put algae, anemones, sponges, any organic living thing or living material, doesn't have to be alive at the moment. They just hitch it to their Velcro-like hairs, their setae, on the back of their carapace, which they then use as camouflage, which is really, really cool. And then we have this gorgeous blue crab. We caught a couple blue crabs as well. Not a surprise. It's summer. They're here in force. And this is a really lovely picture taken by our staff, Olivia. You can see the detail on the shell. You can see the blue coloration on their limbs that give them their name. And you can really see these huge lateral spikes coming out of the carapace. Those are what we measure their carapace width with. So this one is, I mean, it's 18 centimeters, almost 18 centimeters, 17 and a half centimeters, it looks like, across. Their arm span is usually at least twice that, sometimes 2.5 times their carapace width if they're a big male. And this one indeed was a big male. You can see here by looking at the underside, this narrow pointed back section of the carapace indicates that this is a male. Females would have a wider triangle on the bottom, because that would actually allow her to, that would pop out and allow her to hold her eggs to her. Whereas in the males, it doesn't do anything because he doesn't have to hold eggs. It just has to extend so that he can mate. You can see how big his arms are, I was talking about as well. Okay. We had a lot of other great pictures that I don't have time to get to all of them, but thank you to everyone for submitting these. A lot of insects, honeybees as well, some other beetles and bugs. So now we will be moving into the question and answer portion. I'm just going to see if we have any questions. If you have a question and you haven't asked one, please comment below. But otherwise, I'll just get started with the questions that we do have. Okay. How do you tell the difference between butterflies and moths? So that's a really good question. There are two really, really easy ways to do that. The first way is to look at their antennae. And actually, let me pull up a picture so I can show you exactly what I mean. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. So when we're looking at butterflies, right? When we're looking at their antennae, this is the red Admiral again. You can see that they have this very narrow stalk of the antennae, and then antenna singular, and then it ends in this little bulb. And any butterfly you look at is going to have something similar. Sometimes the bulbs are less pronounced, like in this tiger swallowtail. The monarch, you can still see thin, narrow shaft of the antennae with a little bulb at the end, compared to this moth, right? The Snowberry clearwing is a moth species. And not only does it not have that narrowness that comes out into a bulb at the end, but it has these feathers, this little feathering on the side, all the way up the length of the antenna. Some moths have, it literally looks like a feather, like a huge feather coming out as their antennae. This one looks less so, but still moths, generally speaking, all have feathering on their antennae. The second way to tell the difference between a butterfly and a moth easily is to look at what their wings do when they are resting. Butterflies fold their wings up across their back. So like the Admiral, like the Monarch, they're pointed up in the same direction as their back. This butterfly has its wings extended in flight position, but if it were to close them, it could close them up. Now, I think we do actually have a picture of a moth with its wings closed. Yeah, here we go. So this is a Cloverworm moth, and you can see that its wings are not in flight position. However, they're not up. They are folded back along the length of its back, kind of like a different kind of bug. Almost like beetle wings fold back across their back. So that's one of the easier ways to tell is moths just can't they don't often fold their wings up in a rest position. I mean, some of them do. There's always exceptions to every rule, but a lot of moths just don't do that the way butterflies do. So those are two general rules. Antennae is a little better, in my opinion. And then I think we have, at the moment, we have one more question, which is, are parasitoid wasps like that one common? Yes, actually, they're incredibly common. Parasitoid wasps, wasps that make use of another arthropod, usually arthropod, like a bug or an arachnid or something, as part of their life cycle. They are so numerous, they actually rival, maybe potentially rival beetles in number. There are, 300,000 species of beetles across the globe. There are at least, I believe, by last reckoning, 150,000. I've heard there's wide guesses as to how many there actually are, because we haven't discovered everything yet. But they might rival beetles, parasitoid wasps. And part of the reason for that is parasitoid wasps are very specific, and they usually only lay their eggs in one type of animal. And obviously, if there are n number of animals, there are potentially that many parasitoid wasps. For the most part, it's only other arthropods, other insects and arachnids, but there are a ton of those. So yes, they're incredibly common. Like I mentioned before, the Cicada Killers or Cicada Hawks, parasitized cicadas. Tarantula hawks are desert wasps that actually paralyze tarantulas, whole tarantulas, and lay their eggs in them. And there's a lot of variance within those. Some of them lay them in larvae, some, like I was mentioning, some of them lay them in the adults, like the tarantula hawk or the cicada hawk. Some of the parasitoid wasps freeze the target insects or arachnid's body, and it just doesn't move, and they preserve it. Some of them let them go on living while the larvae develop in their body. So there's a ton of diversity, and they are incredibly common. They've actually been used or considered for use as a biological control. You always have to be careful of introducing species somewhere, but specifically with an invasive beetle species called the emerald ash borer, which really just wreaks havoc on trees, and came over from East Asia. I don't know if they actually followed. There were some preliminary studies quite a few years ago looking at potentially using parasitoid wasps as a control method, just because if there's a bug species, there's probably a wasp that can parasitize it. Anyway, very, very cool. Thank you for those questions. And I guess if we don't have any more, I think we're going to wrap up for today. So thank you for your questions. If you do think of a question later about this or anything else, please feel free to reach out to education@hrpt.ny.gov. And if you enjoyed this, our next BioBlitz will be from September 9th to 15th with the Diversity Digest on the 16th at 2 p.m. on Facebook Live, just like today. You can also tune into our Live from the Field tomorrow at 2 o'clock. As usual, we will be looking at some plankton samples using smartphone microscopes. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you for next month's BioBlitz, and looking forward to seeing what you guys find in the park. Thank you so much.